Hi, everybody. We're here today to talk about this idea of what we call mindfulness. Some of us have heard this in many different contexts, many different forms. We've heard people say, be mindful. What exactly does that mean when we talk in terms of mindfulness? Well, quite literally, it's our ability as humans to be fully present in any given moment. It's so easy with the distractions and any given day and any life that we lead to be distracted and not to be present. To be mindful is to be aware of where we are and what we're physically doing, what we're literally doing, and what we're mentally doing, and not overly reacting to a situation and be overwhelmed by what's going on around us, but really taking in every given moment for what it is, recognizing cues, recognizing things that we've seen in the past and those learning experiences, and how we can better apply them to what we're currently dealing with to make a proper, conducive, right, and mindful decision. And quite literally, the best way that we can sum this up and the best way that we can truly take this to heart is to recognize these moments before it's too late, so to speak. Being mindful is being cognizant of our past and our past dealings and our past learning lessons. But when we recognize those moments in the present and we live in those moments and we make good and calculated and educated decisions, it's something that better sits in our heart and something that we can better live with as we move on into the future, and we understand that where we are at in those present moments are all because of past dealings and past decisions that we've made that have got us to that point. So we have to be content with the decisions that we've made. We have to honor those decisions, and we have to understand that even if those decisions may or may not have led to something good, or for this case, bad, we have to understand that with the bad comes good learning lessons, and that is something that we can build upon. You see, I think in life all too often we hang our hats on when we're right and, you know, kind of just being stubborn at heart in terms of wanting to feel like we've got that last word in edgewise, or we were right in a given moment with a statement that we made or a comment that we made or a fact that we presented. But quite honestly, when we're wrong is when we see growth. It's when we recognize that there's something out there that we didn't know, something out there that people around us knew that we didn't know, and they brought it to the table and ultimately gave us a valuable learning lesson. So I always predicate myself around this idea that I'm always willing to admit my faults, admit when I'm wrong, because it means that I was learning and I'm just growing as an individual. You see, you don't really have growth when you're right because it's something that you already know, something that maybe you've already perfected. But when you're wrong and you have that cognizant ability to step forward and say, I'm going to admit that I'm wrong, growth instills in us because we understand in those moments that those situations are bigger than just us. And we recognize that there's valuable pieces to the puzzle all around us. People who have tremendous value, tremendous vision, tremendous knowledge, a tremendous skill set, all of which we can use to make a better version of ourselves. So we need to recognize these moments before it's too late. It's kind of that old adage that you don't recognize what you have until it's gone, and it's very true. We recognize it in the midst of tragedy, in the midst of loss. But those moments are too little too late, where we sit there and we reflect, what we had was so great. And that's where we start to have regret, when we wish that we would have said more. We wish we would have done more. We wish that we would have gone out on a farther limb to make sure that our presence was known and that the people around us felt true value to what they held in our lives and what we hold in theirs. But quite honestly, we get so caught up in this idea of pleasing ourselves and these survival mechanisms of going into self-protection mode, of always trying to protect ourselves, that quite honestly we aren't cognizant of those around us, and understanding that we need to reach out to those people who hold tremendous meaning in our lives and letting them know, hey, you have great value to me, and I want you to understand that I'm so appreciative for those things that you've done. All of this ties into mindfulness, and it's really rooted in what we call self-awareness, and this idea of awareness, of being aware of our surroundings, being aware of the people that are around us, taking social cues and learning from them, and recognizing with certain social cues that they're all trying to tell us to do something, to be something more, to say something. Some of us are so unaware, for this matter, and so unself-aware, that we don't pick up on these social cues, and we are then at that point deemed as if we are selfish, because quite honestly, our physical presence and what we indicate to others is that we're so consumed within our own lives that we fail to recognize what it is that other people are indirectly trying to tell us, what society is trying to tell us, what certain situations are trying to portray to us. And ultimately, not only do we be seen as selfish at that point, but we also are regarded as people who aren't teachable, who aren't good learners. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, we learn out on a lot of missed out teaching and learning lessons because we become so self-absorbed. Those survival mechanisms of trying to be self-protecting in certain situations. And for many of us, it's quite literal distraction, if you will. Being so wrapped up in our world that we fail to recognize what's going on around us. It's that phone that sits in front of our face. It's, social media. It's everything tied into what society has brought into the table in terms of a distraction today. Really pulls us away from these present moments and not being mindful. We constantly try to justify our actions. Oh, I was taking a Snapchat or a video so I could relive it later. But quite honestly, there's nothing as good as reliving, or rather living in a present moment and experiencing it for its first wholehearted, pure first time. For many of us, we go to concerts and we're sitting there filming 3/4 of the time rather than putting down the phone and living in the present moments and taking in what's going on around us, within us, inside of us, next to us, the people that we're with, the people that we're sharing those actual specific moments with. We take away from those moments by having out the phone, the distraction. Because we feel the need to film it, and we justify our actions by saying, oh, I'm filming it so I can reflect upon it later. No, you're actually filming it to then put it up on social media, so then you can brag to everybody about what it is that you were doing, what it is that you were experiencing, and it almost boosts up your own ego that you feel like you're living this picture-perfect life, because quite honestly, majority of what we post online, on social media, are just tidbits of the glitz and glamours of our life. But quite honestly, we all know that life isn't always so pure. It's not always so great. What makes it great is that there is imperfections and that there is trials and tribulations, but what makes it great is how you overcome and how you learn from those tidbits of trials and tribulations and the imperfections in life. And a part of those imperfections come from within ourselves, and that's what makes us all so beautiful, is that while we all can be so pure and so great at heart, we have our little imperfections, but those are what makes us individually, what makes us unique in our own right. Not unique to be considered different, which is what people sometimes define unique to be, but to literally be considered one of a kind people. That's what unique is. And so we think about this idea of mindfulness, and we take it a step further. How can I literally put the art of being mindful to practice? Well, for many of us, living in that present moment, it can be something as simple as breathing, taking a deep breath and really taking in the present moment and just releasing all that tension, that energy that's distracting us and pulling us outward, and putting it towards the present moment. For some of us, a good starting point might be with the simple question of asking ourselves this. And that question is why? And you might say, why would I ask myself why? What is that in any indication of, or what is that leading me towards? You see, there's this author, his name is Simon Sinek, and he's written this book called Start With Why. And when you start with why, with the things that you pursue, the things that you do in life, the endeavors that you are about, and you ask yourself the why question, It puts value on what you're doing. Let me explain further. Typically, we're in such a point A to point B facet in how we live, how we operate, and it's quickest way to get from point A to point B. How do we make that happen? We usually ask ourselves the who, what, where, when, and how. We fail to ask ourselves the why question. Not why to be skeptics, but why to gather information about what it is that we're participating in and to put value on that particular thing. For example, I really try as a foundational owner of a nonprofit organization for people who suffer from paralysis to answer that why question to all my donors. I try to let them know the ins and outs of where the dollars are going, why we're doing what we're doing, why it's not covered by government, why it's not this, why it's not that. Not to get political with it, but simply to educate those who are putting their time, their effort, their means into the foundation in monetary ways and ways of time and effort, so they can understand the why behind all of this, to really put a value on what it is that the foundation stands for and what it is that they're supporting. If we translate this to different facets of our own life, why are we studying? For many students, they might ask themselves the who, what, where, when, and how, simply so they can finish an assignment and move on to the next thing. But if they were to start with why, and maybe dig into the true context of what a certain subject, a certain lesson is all about, maybe they can really understand the foundation that is trying to be set to ultimately lead them to a different topic that's much bigger, that is rooted in the same thing. So you understand, when we ask ourselves the why prior to doing certain things, it puts value on what we're doing and it makes us more mindful, because we have a sense of appreciation of what it is that we're supporting, what it is that we're there for, what it is that we're doing. So there's more effort behind what we're doing, but most importantly, there's more intention behind what we're doing. We're not just reacting. It's a calculated decision to act and be a certain way when there's an emphasis on the why and there's passion and reasoning behind it. Another way to approach mindfulness is this idea of compartmentalization. It's kind of a mouthful of a word, but it's really this idea that's rooted in being able to clear the decks of your mind, quite literally, ridding yourself of the distractions and being present in a moment where we have our mind pulled in so many different directions. For many of us, it's where we were at previously prior to getting to this new location in life. It's really what we deem life to be, transitioning, if you will, this idea of compartmentalization. If I leave my house and I'm going to work out, it's being able to leave all the stuff I was doing at home and leave that at home. And then when I get to my workout, I've cleared the decks of my mind and I'm wholeheartedly living in the moment of working out. Or if I then leave my workout and I'm so wound up and I end up leaving my workout and I go off to work, it's being able to leave my workout at the place that I worked out and then to be able to go to my place of work and focus there. So it's quite literally clearing the decks of your mind, living in a present moment, and being able to transition fluidly, easily, and to give yourself, your mind, your heart wholeheartedly to that given moment, and to not have the distraction of what happened before, what you're needing to do next, what happened days ago, previous interactions with those people. It's being able to be present, to be in a moment, and to give yourself wholeheartedly to that moment without distractions of whatever it may be, namely a phone, if you will. And you might say, well, let's, take this even a step further. Say I do these things, I compartmentalize well, I ask myself why, I use these breathing techniques, I'm self-aware. What could make me more mindful? What external factor? And I'm here to tell you a sense of community can do that. A sense of having a bigger picture, something that's bigger than ourselves, that we are rooted in, that we're invested in. And it's a community behind us, in front of us, a community that we're moving towards, that we can rally behind, that we know are supportive factors in us. And we use that community to rally together to do great and big things. I speak to it in terms of my foundation. with how my community, quite literally the city I live in, comes together, and how that has become a backbone to what it means for what it is that I do. I understand with every decision that I make, it affects somebody else around me. That's what I mean when I talk about community. It could be family, it could be intermediate family, it could be extended family, it could be friends. It's the people around you where when you are mindful and you make calculated decisions, you understand that those decisions are not just going to affect yourself, they're going to affect the person to the left and to the right of you. And when you start to have a value and a sense of importance that when you decision make, it's going to affect those around us positively and negatively, that sense of community becomes a part of your decision making, because you understand that every decision is bigger than just you. And that's where true selflessness comes into play, when you start making decisions on behalf of others. And you make these decisions on the betterment of others, because you understand that with every decision you make, it's going to lead you down a certain and or a different path. And ultimately, it can lead you to a path of success, a path of failure, a path of shame, humility. But having said that, we all need to be more cognizant of being mindful, being present, and being in those moments, so we can live and make those decisions with no regrets, because we understand that those decisions hurt those around us. And we would rather not hurt. We would always rather heal. We would always rather bring good values, good just morals and good decision making to the table, so ultimately it can affect those around us in a positive light. We move forward in this idea of just, when you're mindful, having a sense of attention to detail. Oftentimes we continue to say life is moving so fast. Things are progressing so quick, and, in a blink of an eye, look, a year went by. Why does life seem like it's moving quicker than ever before? And here's why. I'm here to tell you why. And it's this idea of, we're not experiencing those first in our lives more continuously as we grow older. For example, you experience a certain situation. The first time you've ever done something, you get really excited about it. You're taking in the full moment because there's so much stimulation of things you've never experienced before. And the second time you go and you do those things, there really isn't that attention to detail factor, because you automatically go into cruise control and you say, well, I've been here, I've done that. And, I've experienced it all. So your mind kind of goes into cruise control. And what happens is you don't really pay attention to those little details. So yes, life seems to move by much faster because you're not so invested and stimulated into those moments that you go into cruise control, and before you know it, you're 30 miles down the road. But when you're attentive and you're in a moment and you pay attention to detail, you seem to pick up on those little details in everything that it is that you do, everything that you experience. It's kind of that idea of every time you watch a movie, for the second and third time, you pick up on something new. That's probably the only facet in life where we continue to do something, and we pick up on something new more continuously. At least it seems that way. With other facets of our life and our other endeavors, we truly aren't experiencing those first again, and we go into autopilot, and we don't pay attention to detail. We go to school, and we've been in class before, so we figure that we can sit in the back and get away with not really paying attention. But when we don't pay attention to those details, of course life seems faster, but also we miss some of those really important moments that try to tell us something. And I'm such a person of accountability, and this idea of accountability is very important to me. We have a world that we live in where so many people justify their actions for many different reasons, and people really have grown unaccountable. There's this idea that our small voice can't make a difference. Our small donation doesn't go very far, so why give it all? I'm just one person, so my time's not really that valuable to this organization or this endeavor. And quite honestly, that's reverse thinking. Some of the biggest things that have happened and changed in this world have in fact been by one single person. At least they've started that way, a one brilliant idea that people then have rallied around to make a true difference. So we all need to approach life with this mentality that we're going to be accountable, but also that our one and our small voice can really have a broad reach and make a true impact. Our single donation can be impactful because it sets a precedent, it sets a standard, it sets an example for those behind us to take note and then take action. So this idea of accountability, it's this idea of obviously taking responsibility for your actions, but also owning up for your mistakes, owning up, when you've done wrong. And quite frankly, we live in a world that honestly, we deflect so much off onto the people around us because we never want to take blame. We're not really in that respect willing to display humility. And it's all too bad because it all ties back into mindfulness and living in a present moment. We're not able to wholeheartedly do that when we're not accountable because we're throwing blame off onto other people. But of course, when things go right and we do things right and we want praise, of course we're accountable then. Of course, oh yes, I did this right, yada, yada, yada. And of course we're wanting that love and that, sincere regard from people around us. But what if we had reverse thinking there where we are accountable for the things that we did wrong? Again, that's where growth instills, right? And so, how do we tie this all in together? For some of you who are on the other end of this that are listening, maybe a sense of mindfulness might mean this. It might mean the ability to go out and maybe exercise. Exercising seems to be this one facet of life where we can be selfish for a few moments of our life in a given day and focus on ourselves, focus on taking care of our body, because reality would tell us this. If we don't take care of ourselves and we don't take care of our body, then we won't be able to help others for as long as we want to. And when life comes down to it, it's about truthfully and really helping others. If you're not living a life on mission to serve others, then you're living a life that quite honestly is not living it to its fullest. You have to recognize and understand that when you give, you will receive. That's how life works, and it's tied into karma, it's tied into a lot of these things, but we feel so inclined to receive and then not acknowledge those who have given to us the true thanks and the true appreciation that they deserve. But we wholeheartedly become too much of receivers and not enough givers, and this is where it ties back into the accountability factor of doing our small part. You see, when we all do our small part and we give small bits of ourselves, this whole mentality of the world will really change. And so I believe it's rooted in exercise. I believe it's our ability to go out, to give ourselves selfish moments for just a few minutes of our day, take care of our body, and that's where we can truthfully be mindful. We can live in the present moment. Focus on those little movements that can really take us to a different place, that can really clear the decks of our mind, clear the decks of all of our distractions, where we can move on to different facets, different points of our day, and really be focused on what it is that we're doing, because we've gotten out that tension, we've had that release of energy, and then we can provide that energy to different places. You see, exercise is medicine. And I believe in this. I have to believe in it as somebody who's confined to a wheelchair for some 16 hours a day when I'm out of bed. And I believe that exercise is the way of future, and the medicine that it provides just the ability to go out and be present and be mindful. So I encourage you, those who are listening into this, to understand this idea of mindfulness and what it might mean to you, because it means something different to all of us. It's all perception based. And how do you be present? And quite honestly, I encourage you today to truly try to display that act of mindfulness in every bit that you do, so you can compartmentalize you can compartmentalize well with how you live your life and being able to transition efficiently and fluidly, that you can ask yourself the why it is that you're doing what you're doing. So at that point, you can then be self-aware and you can be aware of your surroundings. You can recognize the moment before it's too late. You can clear the decks of your mind so the people that you're talking to know that you're fully invested in those conversations. And then when that happens, relationship then spurs, that you really feel a connection with these people. And they then become a part of your community. And then the community that you have around you then becomes bigger in terms of your mindfulness, because you start making selfless decisions, knowing that it's for the betterment of those around you, and not willing to hurt the person to the right and to the left of you. And then at that point, you start to be attentive and you start to pay attention to details and you start to recognize things, and you understand that even though you're not experiencing those first in your life continuously, that you're willing to invest in those moments and be attentive so life can slow down. You can take in every detail for what it is, and you're not just on cruise control through your life. And then ultimately, when you're paying attention to detail, you'll be so invested in a moment that you can be fully accountable for understanding every action that you make, everything that you do, and you can understand that there's a value to every decision that you make, both good and bad, and we need to be accountable for the good things that we do, but most importantly for the bad. And then we understand the importance, how exercise ties into all of this, the one moment where we can be selfish, but you can go into those moments by being mindful for what they are, getting the most out of, getting that full exertion, that full release, and then being able to transition to different parts of our life where we've ridded ourselves of those distractions and we can be fully invested into those moments with other people. We can be mindful, we can get rid of the phone, rid of the Snapchat, rid of the filming, and be there and be present. So thanks for those listening in. I'm Hal Hargrave. We're here talking about mindfulness today, and let's go apply it to our lives now.